Final hour overdrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Big hour. Darren Dreger coming up later in the hour. Bill Shaikin of the LA Times. Brian Azio, Doug, Jeff O'Neill. Leafs coming off a big win last night. Austin Matthews scores 2. He had 5 points.
Big response.
Big game. Big response. And William Nylander hit 90 points last night, too.
Yeah, and you know what? He had that little dip after he signed his contract, but he's been damn good ever since.
He was unreal. That Bobby McMahon goal he set up last night was unbelievable. And he almost did it in Philly the night before, just dancing through defense, like powerful,
that was a
man.
Sick move, man.
Yeah.
Like just going to the inside and then cutting back around, getting to the net in Philly. And that goal last night was sick. He's playing really good.
Playing great, man. He's playing like a man possessed. You always say a guy with skin in the game.
That's
a guy
it.
He's figured it out. Like he's a big boy, Willie. Like Nylander's not a small guy.
He's a powerful man. Like he's a big, strong dude who can shoot the puck and take it to the net. Like it's great to watch him play like that. It's great to see the consistency, the intensity, and just willing to go there. Because in the past it was a lot of turn-ups and spin back. I want to just take it to the net, man. You're big and strong like that, and you got hands. Take it to the hole.
He is what he did last night, the night before, and he's done it multiple times this year. Is he can drive his own line now? Like that's established. Like he's the man on the line. And if you have Matthews playing like he did last night, Nylander playing like he did last night, then you find where Marner fits, Tavares fits, Domi, Bertuzzi. Like you work around those two guys as line drivers, and the other pieces important and also incredibly impactful. Like when Marner's on his game, he's one of the 12 or 15 best players in the world. But Nylander and Matthews are big and powerful. Like they can lean on you and they can change a game in a second. And we saw that last night on multiple fronts. And that's got to carry over. Like that's what we keep talking about. That's what we mean in the playoffs, where Willie goes, screw it. Give me the puck at the red line and look out. Like, I'm going to change this game right now. And he has that capability, and he's proven he can do it all year. And, it feels like he's a lock to hit 100 points. If he stays healthy, that's a big milestone. Like, he gets to 100 points. That's massive. Matthews with 5 last night. He's going to get to 100 points. Nylander, Domi had 4 assists last night. And everyone's going over what he's accomplished in terms of 5-on-5 assists, but that has really been kind of making the rounds online. I saw last night someone tweet out that only McDavid, McKinnon, Kucherov, Draisaitl, Stützle, and Quinn Hughes have more 5-on-5 assists than Max Domi. Pretty substantial group and pretty impressive.
That's a good company, man.
Yeah, like that's pretty impressive. So more on that with Darren Dreger later in the hour. So the Shohei Ohtani, ESPN LA Times story that broke, and his interpreter and the amount of money, this has just shocked the world, and it's gone around the world. And Shohei obviously was with the Dodgers, playing the Padres earlier today, played them yesterday, making his debut with the Dodgers. Now they're, I believe, on a flight already home. They got to play spring training games before they play again next Thursday like everyone else in Major League Baseball. But prior to him getting back to Dodger Stadium, prior to resuming the season with the Dodgers, something is going to have to give on this story because it broke yesterday. It is a bombshell. And the stories from the Ohtani camp have already changed over the course of a couple of days or couple of hours, where originally it was his interpreter saying, no, Ohtani gave me the money for the gambling debt. And now it's no, Dodgers fire his interpreter, and Ohtani's lawyer saying that the money was stolen. But the feds are involved. Major League Baseball, I would believe, is involved in some capacity. It is a wild story. Let's head to L.A. now. Here's Bill Shaikin of the L.A. Times. How you doing, Bill?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So we're obviously, your paper, heavily involved in this. When you hear the news and you brace for it as a journalist, where did your head go to first when you heard what was coming?
Well, we had a number of people working on the story, and in fairness, I wasn't one of the main ones. So I didn't have the blow-by-blow of what was happening, but clearly what we had figured out, and in fairness to ESPN, what they had figured out too, was there was a federal investigation into illegal sports betting. They were looking into one particular bookie here in California. And in the course of that, Shohei's name came up. And so the reporters, both for the LA Times and ESPN, were trying to figure out why. And as you mentioned, the people representing Ohtani legally put out a statement saying Ipe, the interpreter, had basically stolen the money. But before that, as you mentioned, they had also had an interview conducted where Ipe said, "Oh, Shohei basically fronted me the money to cover my losses." So clearly one of those two things is not true, and it's possible that neither one is. All we have basically are conflicting statements from parties representing Shohei, and that's it.
Who needs to speak next on this? Is it Rob Manfred, or like does Ohtani have to address? Is he going to address it himself? Like, who needs to speak next?
Because it's impossible to know what the feds know, I can't give you a great answer to that question. If you're a lawyer and you have any concern, your first two words to a client or prospective client usually is, shut up, right? Don't say anything that can or may be used against you in a court of law. So until MLB and Ohtani's people and whoever Ipe, the interpreter, hires to represent him, because clearly his interest and Shohei's interest are now completely different. It's hard to say who should say something next or if they should say something at all, and that's a legal matter. Now, from a PR matter, it's a complete nightmare. And the fact that nobody is saying anything, while that's entirely defensible legally, certainly leaves the door open for a lot of speculation about what did and did not happen. Mostly, if you believe the story that was most recently presented to the public, and that this was theft, then how was the translator, the interpreter, the one that had access to all the money? That doesn't seem to add up on the surface anyway. Mm-hmm. So that might be something they want to get at. But again, I'm sure the lawyers will be busy clearing everything first.
Yeah, and yet he keeps playing ball. He played today, and, his interpreter, his friend, his very close friend, was in the dugout yesterday. They were chuckling, top-stepping, doing the whole thing, winning ball games, and looked lockstep and happy. And then next thing you know, he's fired. With Bill Shaikin of the LA Times, if you're Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers, what is the best case scenario here? What is the worst case scenario?
I think that Ohtani's people were presenting what they believe, at least based on what's publicly known at this point, to be a best case scenario, which is Ipe, the interpreter, basically stole money from Shohei, who knew nothing about it. And none of Ohtani's people knew anything about it until the LA Times and ESPN started asking questions. That's the best case. Whether that's actually what happened, it's way too soon to know. And as you mentioned, because they presented a completely alternative version, I think the worst case is that because this is an active federal investigation, sometimes criminal charges follow, sometimes they don't. If the story of Ipe stealing the money from Shohei is true, clearly he essentially confessed to a crime in his statements to ESPN, and he would be subject to prosecution if prosecutors can find evidence to support that story. If what Ipe said in his initial conversation is true, that Shohei was just helping out a friend and Shohei knew about it, it turns out, depending on how the authorities look at this, that could be a crime too. Mm-hmm. Fronting somebody money to use with an illegal sports betting operation in this country is a federal crime. So that would probably be the worst case, that, Shohei would be subject to criminal prosecution. But again, it's way, way too early.
Yeah, exactly. It's way too early. Everyone's, asking us, I'm sure asking you, Bill, a million people, like, where does this go next? Is his legacy on the line? It's way too premature to know that.
Hey,
yeah.
Has there been any talk about what the gambling was on, what sport, or that hasn't been determined?
Not that I'm aware of, Bill. I don't know if you have any idea on that.
When Ipe was provided to ESPN for his interview, he made clear it was not on baseball.
Right.
Beyond that, no, we couldn't tell you specifically. But again, we don't really know. I mean, all we're going on is that Ohtani's name showed up somehow, and we don't entirely know how, in the sports betting investigation. ESPN had mentioned, and we mentioned too in our story, talk about how the money was transferred. And of course, if Ohtani's name shows up there in the transfer of money from Ipe to the bookie, then that would be one way. But is that it? Is there something more? We just don't know.
Right. And how do you trust a bookie? How do you trust now a former employee, possibly scorned? This is all yet to be determined. And if we're dealing with the feds, there's only so much Major League Baseball in and of itself can do. I mean, they've got to let the legal process play out. But this is where, I think a lot of people's heads are buzzing when you see reports today. I believe The Athletic and others reporting, as of now, Major League Baseball is not investigating. That feels almost impossible to believe, Bill, that you have a bombshell like this. Ohtani's name is directly attached to it. They immediately fire the guy. How this doesn't lead to some sort of an investigation and, different context, clearly different penalties. But let's say it is a scenario where, there was no betting on baseball and Ohtani either got duped here. Let's take duped out of it. Let's say he was just being a good friend. How many times over the years have we heard steroid users or guys that get clipped for PEDs say, unknowingly, I didn't know. And maybe they were being honest, but they still got suspended. Right? It was still, hey, sorry, these are the rules. Like, I wonder how that plays out, Bill, if it gets to a point where it's like, okay, I did this, but I was just being a good friend. It wasn't on baseball, which means I think general society will say, all right, you didn't hurt anybody necessarily. But how does baseball handle this if it gets to that point? I know it's hypothetical, but considering we're talking about the crown jewel here, this is Shohei Ohtani. He hasn't even played in the States yet. He hasn't even played at Dodger Stadium as an LA Dodger.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the start of the emergence of the face of baseball, right? Mm-hmm. In Anaheim with the Angels, he was, I don't want to say overlooked because everybody knew how great he was, but, he wasn't playing with one of the marquee franchises in baseball. And given that he's got now the highest contract in baseball history, and he's playing with a team that's expected to get to the World Series and expected to win it, none of those things, of course, were true in all the years he played in Anaheim, that this is, like you mentioned, crown jewel time. And it's going to be tricky. I mean, to say Major League Baseball put out a statement saying it's not investigating initially is true. To say they're not going to look into it in some manner, I think we all realize is not true. They will, of course, look into that. But one thing that's been made clear in many MLB investigations, most recently, in terms of our audience here in Los Angeles with regard to the Trevor Bauer investigation, was that Major League Baseball is not a law enforcement agency. And so they don't have some of the powers that police or district attorneys or anybody else in the legal process might have. They can't go raid somebody's house. They can't issue subpoenas. They can't demand people come talk to them for the most part. So MLB generally prefers to see what evidence turns up from people who can make people talk to them and go from there. And I think, like I said, we're at the start of what's going to be a very long journey.
With Bill Shaikin of the LA Times on this Shohei Ohtani story as interpreter, and the story that came out courtesy of the LA Times and ESPN. And it's really a Hollywood story that's going to break loose in Hollywood. Like, you're from there, the market, Bill. It's one thing for the LA Times, ESPN, Then there's TMZ, and there's TikTokers, and there's people with phones. Like, this guy's a really private guy, yet when he gets to L.A., he's in L.A.
Dude,
Like,
everyone's coming out for this.
right. Like, I'm curious how you think the market's going to react, that journalists are going to react, and also, modern journalism. How does it play out with this Ohtani story?
I don't know that we have enough facts to answer that question, but one of the things that had come up in Ohtani's transition from the Angels to the Dodgers is that Ohtani had a very regular schedule of when he would talk to the media because, as you may know, there are Japanese journalists, and not just one or two, but many, that are on assignment just to follow Ohtani. They come to all the games, last year the Angels, this year the Dodgers, and they're just writing down what Ohtani does every day. That's their job. So now you add that to the regular media corps with the Dodgers, and the question was, how is that going to do? Because last year he liked to talk on days he pitched. Obviously, he's not going to pitch this year. He's recovering from surgery. So after the Dodgers' first game in Korea, and nobody knew about the betting situation at that point, reporters went up to talk to Ohtani in his locker after the game, which is sort of standard operating practice in Major League Baseball. But it hasn't really been with Ohtani. And as soon as the Dodgers staff people came in to try to intercept reporters, Ohtani said, no, it's great. I'm happy to talk. They just won the game. Everything was good. And then after the second game, which was, this morning our time, reporters also went up to Ohtani. Now, of course, they had some other questions they wanted to ask. And there were multiple Dodgers officials stationed outside his locker to try to keep reporters away. So if that's going to be a daily happening, it's going to change the dynamic, I would think, in the clubhouse a lot.
No kidding. Yeah, this is a bombshell that's not even 24 hours old, really, in terms of the public getting their hands on it. And when he lands in L.A., we'll see. It's, unofficial opening day a week today. I'm sure a lot more will break between now and then. Appreciate the insight, Bill. Thank you for doing this.
All right, take care. Bill
Shaikin of the L.A. Times. The reporting is interesting on this because, again, they allowed, the Ohtani camp allowed his interpreter to speak on the record.
How lawyers didn't get to that guy and say, don't even, I don't know. It's bizarre, man. The whole thing is bizarre.
It's completely bizarre. And, Ohtani's camp and the Dodgers, they knew that this was coming because he had done the interview. They knew it was going to be revealed. They knew it was coming out. And now
you're telling me this guy admitted to the theft? Like he said, I took the money from Ohtani? He did not admit that.
No, he said Ohtani gave him the money.
Okay.
Like that was his initial statement, was Ohtani helped me out. And then all of a sudden it became, no, wait a minute, the lawyers are involved. You stole the money, you're fired, you're gone. And that's where we are now. So you change up a story that quickly.
Dude, that's greasy.
It's greasy.
Grease involved, man.
And you're talking lawyers, bookies, and feds. Like that's a trifecta right there.
Oh yeah.
To say nothing of superstardom and Shohei Ohtani playing for the Dodgers in LA. This story has the potential to continue to grow and grow and grow. And at some point, Major League Baseball has got to get involved. They have to. They have to.
And as
check
far
in
as
on this.
Ohtani, I know there's going to be heavy lawyers, and you just mentioned all the different parties that are going to be involved. But if he is guilty of someone, it's not like he can get away from it. And if he did do something, he's better be smart enough to realize he better get in front of it and just say, I did this. And I don't know what the consequences of that would be, Hayes, whether that would be a hefty I don't know what the consequences would be, but it's like getting caught with steroids. The guys that just said, you know what, I did it, they were forgiven. But if this guy lies about this and more stories and more facts come out, he looks like a dummy.
Well, and I think the steroid analogy is a good one because when you think of the history of baseball, it's steroids and gambling that have been the black clouds over this sport.
Yes, Jason Giambi admitted that he used steroids, and then nobody talked about Jason Giambi using steroids anymore.
Exactly. And as long as you're not gambling on baseball, because that's the biggest red flag. Like if it is on baseball, then it's a completely different story. Then you're talking nuclear, you're talking Pete Rose. Like what does that mean? What did you know? What kind of info? What kind of detail? and that's the scary stuff. Again, with bookies, like off the beaten path bookies, then you're dealing with extortion. What kind of info do they have? How can they lean on you? Like, this is where it really can get a little bit darker. But I think general society now, if it just came out that if this was the case, hey, my buddy was in deep, or he and I were betting on basketball or soccer or whatever, it got a little bit carried away, I paid it off and it's over, I think most of the people in the world would be like, all right, whatever, who cares? It's your money, it's your time, you didn't hurt anybody, you lost a lot of money, okay. But if it is baseball, or if you get caught up in a web of lies or whatever, that's when it starts to get deeper and a little bit crazier.
And that story you just mentioned, it's not easy to believe that. Like, friendship is one thing, but when somebody goes to another friend and says, I'm in the hole for 4.5, and you have a working relationship like interpreter, and I don't know the closeness of it off the field, but 4.5 is a lot, man, for somebody to say, yeah, no problem, I'll flip you that. And knowing you're never going to get paid back, that doesn't seem believable.
No.
That does not seem believable.
It doesn't really seem believable, and yet it also doesn't really seem believable with, banking what it is, the restrictions being what it is, the loopholes being what they are, the idea that someone can steal $4.5 million without you knowing, if it was that.
Like, you're his interpreter. What did you have access to his bank accounts?
Right.
Like, how did you steal $4.5 million without signing documents, without going through a bunch of systems where you would need codes and all kinds of stuff,
all that
fingerprint?
Kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's huge
How
money.
did you have access to that?
Right, and that's the whole thing. Like, the banks don't just say, yeah, cool, man, what do you have, a 4-letter password? You got it.
Oh, and you're his friend? Go ahead. You have access to it.
Yeah,
it's
it
insane.
does not happen that way. So that's why everyone's radars are going off here.
As they should.
As they should. And again, like using the PED steroid comparison, where how many athletes over the years have said, hey, I got clipped, but I didn't do so I didn't mean to. I didn't know it was. It's happening in curling right now, where it's, a scenario where the athlete's like, I didn't even know. I've been very careful, and it happened to, sneak into my diet somehow. And this is a different context, but if the case from Shohei Ohtani is ignorance, that, I didn't realize, I just gave him the money and he went, okay, but it still is illegal, right? And if you do that and you take PEDs, you're probably still getting suspended, even if you have a justifiable explanation. Mm-hmm. And if your explanation is, hey, he was just a buddy, I wasn't thinking, sorry, you still might have to clip the guy, yet he's the number one draw. He's the biggest thing in baseball. What does that mean?
Chris Colabello, when he played with the Jays, got clipped for steroids, and he swears that he doesn't know how it got in his system.
Right. And then it again gets to a point. Do you believe that? Do you not believe that? I don't know. And I think you bring up a good point. Like, will we be a month from now, 2 months ago? Maybe it just goes away. Maybe it was actually fraud or theft, and it's just done, and see you later. And I don't hope that's the case. That means he's the victim here, clearly. But something happened. And if that's the case, and Ohtani will just continue with his career, and this will be a Wikipedia comment, and we're like, wow, that was a wild story. See you later. Yeah. Move on. This guy's a great player.
But if he's got stuff in the closet that goes back and back and back, it's all going to come up, and he's going to get rinsed.
Right, exactly. And it may get to a point where he could look back on this, and say, you know what I should have done was just admit, hey, it was me and him. We were messing around. I didn't realize it was this, that, or the other. Apologies. I'll take my medicine and move on. And then I think the world would be like, all right, well, that's crazy. And obviously that's a substantial story and a PR nightmare, but it may, in retrospect, be the best course of action, but that's not the course of action they're deciding to take right now. And again, their claim is that this was stolen. And if that's the case, that is definitely a crazy, crazy story that is multi-layered and will not go away anytime soon. All right, Darren Dreger coming up, our TSN Hockey Insider. His take on what happens with Brody moving forward here. Sean Couturier's out again tonight. He was down at the GM meetings. A lot to get into as we recap that as well. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, Best Bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Darren Dreger coming up here in a moment. Leafs coming off a win last night, back in action Saturday. McDavid in town. That still rings out. It will probably ring out the rest of his career.
Oh, yeah.
Right? He rolls through once. You better be there. You better be paying attention.
Didn't he have that Morgan Riley kind of dance goal in Toronto one night?
Yeah.
I know Mo probably does not want us talking about
He
that.
doesn't want to hear about that. I was there for it. I saw it live. It was something. Like, it was wild. And he pulled a move on someone else on the Leafs the next game, I think, in Edmonton. It wasn't. It might have been Brody. It was someone else. It was another defenseman for sure that he danced, and I remember thinking, man, he just went back to back highlight reel goals, and yeah, that guy's already probably got 20 or 25.
Oh my God.
In the bank. That would just be 95% of players in NHL history. Their greatest goal ever would be
25. I think he's got 100.
He might. He's. I don't know if he's got 100, but he's 25 is probably slim. But if we're talking like 5 out of 5, 5-star, I can't believe what I just witnessed.
I think there's 100.
100.
Dude, if we ask Struddy the next time, let's have Struddy on tomorrow. We'll ask him if there's 100 5 out of 5 McDavid clips. I think he would say absolutely for fun.
I think that's a bit rich, but it's high. It's high, man.
This might sound
It's high.
stupid to you. I think there's 200.
No, because how many does he have in his career? What does he have? How many goals does he have? 300 and something? I don't know. We'll look that up. But the idea of more than 50% of his goals, like he does score
Ask
ugly
Dregs,
goals.
I guarantee you he'd say there's more than 100.
More than 100.
Yes.
5 out of 5. I mean, it's somewhat subjective how you
think
would
about
define
how many years he been in the league? 8 or 9? 7?
Yeah, this is his 9th year.
There is 100 5 out of 5 highlights from McDavid.
Okay, he has 329 goals in his career. You're saying 1 in 3 are 5 out of 5.
But, dude, what I'm
highlight
saying
reel
is it doesn't necessarily have to be a goal. How about the spinorama, backhand passes, assists, and stuff?
Okay, that's different. I'll give you 100 on that.
Yeah, there's 200. There's 200 5 out of 5 plays that you can put out there.
Like on a Hall of Fame reel?
Yes.
He has 200. They're going to have to cut that down to like 5 minutes at the Hall of Fame. And he's got another 10 years left in his career. Here's Darren Dreger, our TSN Hockey Insider. Do you think McDavid has 200 5 out of 5 highlight reel plays already in his career?
Well, I think O is closer than what most people would say. No, that's too high. It's probably 100. As you guys are going through it, and O qualified that it's the crazy passes, the skating a million miles an hour.
But Dregs, I'm also including possibly things that are eye-popping. The puck does not go into the net. Like he goes 100 miles an hour and dekes around 5 guys. I'm including those as well. Now we're talking 200.
I'm with you at 200. I don't think there's ever any way we're going to be able to qualify this.
No. Corwin will look into it.
I'm buying it. I think it's possible. I do.
You sold me because you bring up a good point, Like he's got 958 points, and yet he's probably had thousands of plays where he's involved. Obviously, he has in his career, and 200 of them were wild. Probably. Like, how many times did he hit a post or he put it on a back door?
Sure.
Some guy got robbed or fanned on it. Yeah, 200. You're probably right. 200 for McDavid. Well, I don't know how we came across that. I guess we were talking about him in town on Saturday night. Yeah, we're plugging towards the game Saturday, but the Oilers are in action tonight. The dust is obviously settled since the trade deadline, and you were down at the GM meetings, Dregs, and a lot of reporting coming out of that. It was, I guess, relatively, I don't know, was it quiet? Was it on par with most years? Like, how would you describe what came out of it?
Yeah, I would say it's closer to on par than quiet. We had a pretty good feel and indication as to what was going to be recommended by the general managers. And, we talked about that on Monday and leading into the meetings, coming out of the breakout meetings. I guess the only thing that didn't materialize, truthfully, was the expected fire that George Peros in the Department of Player Safety was going to come under Monday and Tuesday. My understanding is that in one of the breakout groups where George Peros was part of, he felt some heat. There's a couple of managers in there that had some pretty pointed questions. Had some concerns with maybe a lack of feedback that general managers feel during the process, more importantly, after the process, and trying to explain why, the Morgan Riley number, as an example, was what it was as compared to a similar type of play where the suspension wasn't 5 games. So things like that, but that actually didn't materialize. And George Parros takes a lot of bullets over the course of the year. He really, truly does. But I watch him closely around the meetings, and the number of conversations he has with general managers outside of the actual meeting is impressive. And chances are they're talking about or trying to clarify a situation. Again, why did player X get this number of games and my player got 3 more games? Whatever it is, he stands in there, he explains, and he tries to educate. But it didn't materialize the way we thought. But as far as the 2 additional coaches' challenges, one for the deflected puck over glass to take down a penalty, the other for the friendly fire high stick, which also leads to a penalty. I mean, those were agenda items that we expected would get pushed through. They haven't yet been. They need to be approved, go through the league process, but we weren't overly surprised by that coming out on Tuesday.
Dreg, so when Parros is around the other GMs, I'm sure it's not like they're all totally in love with some of his decisions, but it's not like an icy feeling where it's like they're having conversations and everyone's kind of acting professional. It's not like, oh, God, here he comes, the guy we can't stand.
No, it's not like that at all. And here's something that I was reminded of during these meetings. And I think that the one thing, and we reported on this, last Thursday going into the GM meetings, was that Parros was going to present a more expansive review of everything that the Department of Player Safety does. And he did that. But it's important to note that you've got new general managers participating in those meetings for the first time. So even though at times it can feel like we've heard the same thing, it's the same old, there are new ears and new eyes and new people having to make decisions that are part of that process for the first time. So, Parros, I know in the larger group, encourage general managers. It's a bit of a novel idea. If you're coming into New York to play the Rangers, the Islanders, the New Jersey Devils, come in a day early. And as a general manager, spend a couple of hours in the Department of Player Safety and see firsthand how business is done, how painstakingly they clip every marginal situation. And I don't know how many GMs are actually going to take him up on that offer, but he's doing whatever he can do, with the other members of the Department of Player Safety. I think there are 13 total now in that office in New York. He's doing what he can do to keep it as transparent and open to the GMs as he can.
Darren, there was a situation last night where Austin Matthews had a hat-trick goal taken away, and Hayes has talked in the past about it's just a big moment that's wiped out. In your time going down there and talking with GMs and everyone involved with the league, has there ever been discussions, because I think about it quite often, that the offside rule should only be challenged off the initial rush? Any puck that hits the boards, the goaltender, or that momentum is stopped, after that, the offside should be done, in my opinion. Has that ever been discussed?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it has, because they have dissected offside ever since Matt Duchene was like 23 feet offside on that egregious misplay when he was back with the Colorado Avalanche. They have looked at this rule and everything they can do around the rule a dozen different ways. They really, truly have. I watched that play last night live, as we all did. I watched it several times on replay. I think the call was right. Bertuzzi was offside. So what are you going to do about it? Whether it's called by the linesman on the ice at the time or not, and I understand the circumstance, but how often do you see the play develop and the goal will be scored 20, 30, 40 seconds after the entering of the zone, and that goal is taken down because the initial entry was offside. I mean, that happens a lot, and the managers have never been able to reach a place where they go, okay, well, after a certain amount of time or this situation, that nullifies the initial offside. I don't think they'll ever get there.
With Darren Dreger, a TSN Hockey Insider, Bertuzzi and Domi have been a lot better recently, really good. And, they were great last night. Yeah. Domi was great. He's smart cookie, man. He knows. Try to attach yourself to AM 34. That could go a long way for you. But they're both UFAs at the end of the year. We're past the deadline now. Obviously, more games in the regular season and undetermined what happens in the playoffs. But how are what is your understanding of the future of Bertuzzi and Domi in Toronto?
Well, I think you have to have conversation if you're Brad Treliving, and I'd be surprised if they haven't already had conversation with the agents involved here. Just preliminary talk. You guys think about what your appetite is. Put together some parameter ideas, and we'll revisit down the road. You got to be careful, though, because, chances are you're not getting to a place where you're actually negotiating, are you? Because is Tyler Bertuzzi or Max Domi, in this case, willing to just push away from an open market? Yeah, the fit appears to be good. It hasn't been great all year. It's good right now. And I think that Leafs fans can envision what these two players are going to mean to any level of success in Toronto in the playoffs, and they can see a future in that. But if you're Tyler Bertuzzi, you're Max Domi, are you leaving millions on the table to extend with the Maple Leafs because the fit is good? Maybe you would have a couple of years ago, but now these guys are at a point in their career where if they're going to make the money, then they've got to have a good finish to this season. They've got to have good playoff runs, and then they've got to be willing to look at what the open market presents. But I'd be surprised if the Maple Leafs didn't at least try, just given what we're seeing from both these players.
Yeah, and I think the playoffs, it's an interesting scenario, I think, for both sides, the Leafs and the players, where the players can make themselves that much more valuable and worth that much more, and yet at the same time, the team probably more excited to pay these guys if they perform really well in the playoffs. You might have to pay them more, but if these guys go on a run and Bertuzzi and Domi factor in significantly, I don't see why why would you scoff at that? If anything, you'd probably think, okay, that boosts the way we value them and what we think they can bring, because ultimately it's about the playoffs with this team.
It is. And then, not to rip the old scab off here, but, what about the Zach Hyman situation? At the time, the Leafs just didn't have the stomach to get a deal done, even though they were real close. Kyle Dubas was close. Obviously Toronto had the 8th year. It seems like it came down ultimately to trade protection and all of that. But, not that we expect Max Domi or Tyler Bertuzzi to score 50 goals, but, Leafs fans are watching what Zach Hyman is doing with arguably the best players in the game. But still, Zach Hyman deserves credit for the fit that he's been in Edmonton. I don't blame, the existing Leafs management because they didn't make that call. But can you envision that happening with one of these two players? Maybe at a different level, but you know what I'm saying, right? And there's value. Sometimes you just got to make that tough call, and I don't think Brad Treliving is afraid to do that. It just means that if you're paying these guys market value, then you'd better like entry-level fourth-line players and entry-level or, low-level depth defense, because otherwise you're not going to be able to afford both of them, let alone one of them.
Dregs, Edmonton's rolling through town on Saturday night, and I think Draisaitl can start negotiating July 1st. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
What the hell is that guy going to, is he just going to be able to write a number on a piece of paper as far as what that might look like? Because, and I'm not going to get into McDavid and Draisaitl could look elsewhere, but that guy can write a number down on a piece of paper, can he?
Agreed, yes. And look, historically, I think of when Patrick Kane and Jonathan Toews extended back in the day with the Chicago Blackhawks, those mammoth $10 million per year deals. If memory serves, I think that was 14% of the team's salary cap each player got, right? Well, start doing the math on, 87 and then 90 plus million and what the percentage looks like for Leon Draisaitl. If he wants 14, 15, 16% of the salary cap, those are big, beefy numbers. Is he worth that? He is to me. Absolutely he's worth that. Can the Oilers afford to pay him that? No. It's going to be probably the top talking point in the National Hockey League on July 1st and after July 1st until he signs an extension, if he signs an extension. And I think the chances of him signing in Edmonton next summer or this coming summer I just don't think it's going to happen that quickly. The Oilers will have the appetite for it. I don't see Draisaitl doing it. I don't know why he would do it. So I think this could be fascinating to see how it plays out and how it drags on.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what it will be if it drags on.
Yeah.
If it's going to get really loud and naturally, and in Edmonton, I think they're sensitive to it. I think most Canadian markets are. He's not a Canadian, not from Edmonton, and he's a great player. And we'll see what happens in the playoffs. Again, ultimately, playoff success or failure can factor into all of this, including how fans might feel about something breaking out or what the numbers could be or what have you. But I'm with you. Like if he shows up to camp next year and it's, hey, I'm playing this out, that's going to be incredibly loud. But I'm sure he's aware of that. He has to be, or someone better tell him, because that's everywhere he goes, he's going to be asked about it.
He's a confident, ornery dude, though, Brian, right? And he's not going to be afraid of the questions. And at one point, probably soon, if that's how it plays out, he just drops the hammer and says, I'm not answering the question. Mm-hmm. You can ask it. I understand. I'm just not answering it anymore. And I mean, again, we'll be talking about, this is the next big story, and we'll probably got to go here, so I won't drag it out. But, we talked about the idea of a salary cap in the postseason, and there's going to be more discussion on that among the NHL general managers in the near future here. But the next biggest story, if not bigger than that story, is the tax implications and all the organizations, the states that have that advantage. And that matters. In a big, big way, that matters. So, Draisaitl will likely put himself in a position to consider one of those markets, and who wouldn't take him? They'll find a way.
Ooh, well, no kidding, man. That's the thing. You get a guy like that on the market, there's going to be a lot of people kicking tires on that, undoubtedly. All right, Dregs, we'll leave it there. We'll do it again soon.
Okay, guys, have a good night.
Darren Dreger, our TSN Hockey Insider. And, I think Edmonton's preparing for that, but if Draisaitl decides, I'll let you know when I'm officially up, that's going to coincide with McDavid being a year out, which means McDavid can make a call. And I think most of us believe the two of them are very closely linked in terms of their here and now, their future, their best friends. All they know is Edmonton. All they know is playing with each other.
Yeah, but there's going to be two different scenarios. Let's just assume and hope for hockey in Canada that they both stay in Edmonton long term. It's like, I think the one thing that's clear on their mind and what the motivation is behind that, maybe it's just pure competitiveness and being athletes, is they want to get one soon.
Of course.
And maybe that's the idea. Let's get one here, and if things happen in the future where it doesn't work out, then it doesn't work out. But first, let's get one here.
Right.
And we're not trying to start rumors that one of them's going to leave. I hope they stay there for the next 10 years, both of them. But their goal is to get one here soon.
Yes. And they're not alone, obviously. I mean, they're not alone. But you're right. You get a cup in the bank, it loosens a lot of things up. Absolutely.
Man.
Absolutely. All right, we'll come back and wrap up the show. OverDrive continues, TSN 1050 and on the TSN app. All right, today's Best Bets powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Someone's got to win in Detroit tonight. I think it's the Islanders. Islanders money line in Detroit. I don't like the way either team's been playing, but I think the Islanders are more suited for this. Detroit struggling.
Are you up for a hunch side bet?
You got it. You got it. I'm on Sorokin going off tonight.
I'm on the Prime Minister of Defense.
Absolutely. Sorokin Reimer. I'll take Sorokin. Over the numbers, 6.5 Blues Sens tonight. And I like the Oilers by 2+ tonight against Buffalo. We started the show talking about this. Buffalo's been a cool story. They've been picking up some wins recently. Edmonton is rocking it. A bit of a trap game. I know what people are saying. They're coming to Toronto Saturday night, but they didn't love their effort the other night. They still beat Montreal. I think they win and win big tonight. Point night for 97. Today's Best Bets powered by FanDuel. FanDuel's goal in the first 10 minutes is the most electric bet in hockey and can be included in a same-game parlay on any NHL game. Please play responsibly. 19+, physically located in Ontario. All right, so tournament's up and running. We got that all night, right? We got NHL action, NBA action tonight. We got the Leafs-Oilers on Saturday. Spring training wrapping up. We got a lot going on, man. A lot going on. The Valspar, a lot of Canadian flags, the top 25. A lot of Canadian flags.
Are we going to hit on a golf pick this year?
Have to.
We got to get going.
Have to. This is the week. This is the week. I know. We were on Scheffler the last couple of weeks. One of us had Scheffler. You have to. All right. Thanks to everyone behind the scenes for helping out. We appreciate it. Everyone for tuning in today. Radio, TV, podcast, web. We appreciate that. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
If I was the interpreter, you would have thrown me under the bus. 4 p.m.
Never. No comments. We'll chat then.